Hi everyone, Heather here with Astrology with Heather.com, and I am back with Raphael from Reydiant Reality Tarot. Hi Raphael.
Hi.
And today we're going to be continuing our series on tarot and astrology, where we're going to be diving into each of the cards in the Major Arcana. And I highly, highly recommend that if you haven't already done so, that you subscribe to Raphael's channel. He does really brilliant weekly and monthly forecasts for all of the Zodiac signs. They're always weirdly creepy accurate. And I love watching them. And if you want to watch the entire series, you're going to have to subscribe to both of our channels because we're going to be switching off each week. And this week, I'm super excited that we're going to be talking about the Hermit card because apparently that is the Virgo card. And I, of course, am a Virgo. So yeah, how are you doing, Raphael?
I'm good. Thank you so much for that introduction. That was really, really nice of you. I'm chuffed. So glad to be a part of the project. And I love your take on astrology. It's so practical and and it's funny as well. Like you say, my readings are creepy accurate. A lot of the time, I'm like, I'm sure Heather said this was going to be the kind of week that I was having. And then bam, 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 like things will just happen. So I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So I'm super excited to get into the Hermit card. So what are we looking at here?
All right, so we have, it's not like, the most expressive image, of course, because it's like the hermit, right? This is maybe somebody that in old times would be considered a bit of an outcast or somebody that was maybe on a little bit on the fringe. And when I see this card, automatically it reminds me of being able, or rather needing to withdraw from the world in order to gather or gain some sort of information. And one of the things that I see about this card, it's very often about changing your environment so that you can gain some sort of deeper perspective or a deeper wisdom, or sometimes even to analyze or look at things from a different way. And when you think about that, if you never really make yourself quiet, you're never really going to be able to hear your own thoughts, right? Or to gather your own information, or to maybe even hear your own inner high priestess. So I always say this to people when I see the Hermit card: if your high priestess were your intuition, your Hermit card would be how you got to listen to her, how you understood what her message was. So you have to make yourself silent. You have to put yourself in a different frame of mind, in a different state of understanding, in order for your intuition to speak. So when one of these cards shows up, i.e. the High Priestess, it's often a message that you need to slow down or quiet yourself because your intuition is trying to speak to you. If you see the Hermit card, it's like she's got a message for you, but you're not quite hearing it. So really interesting energy. And very often it's about knowing something, not guessing, not thinking, like something that you've gathered knowledge or gained over time to really know something well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's almost like a Mercury and Virgo energy. Virgo sun energy can be similar too, but that's kind of an energy where it's like overthinking and overanalyzing things. And I mean, that could be a Mercury and Virgo energy too. But yeah, it's kind of like quiet down and listen. But with Mercury and Virgo, it's actually a little bit different because it's in its home sign. So Mercury and Virgo is very easily able to hone in on the details, hone in on the right facts, hone in on the right figures, organize their thoughts appropriately. It is definitely an introspective energy in terms of like internalizing your thoughts and all of that, and then turning that into some sort of plan of action. But Mercury in traditional astrology is exalted there, even though it's also its home sign. And so that to me seems like a very Mercury in Virgo energy, as opposed to Sun in Virgo, which is a little bit different. I mean, it could be kind of like that, but that's it's a little bit more challenging with the Sun in Virgo.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about that because I know that once the sun moves out of Leo, it's kind of descending, right? So it's heading into a different sort of energy. So why Virgo and the harvest? What is that? What's the link there?
Well, Virgo, of course, obviously it's like the season of the harvest. So that's a big part of it because in Western astrology, we're looking at the seasons in the Western hemisphere as a marker of the astrological signs in the tropical zodiac. But Virgo and the harvest, that's kind of an interesting one because Leo is kind of like when you're putting everything out there, out into the open. and you're just kind of doing. It's a very active energy. Virgo is more about not assimilation necessarily, but breaking things down and breaking things apart. And so when you think about Virgo in terms of the physical body, it rules things like the digestive system and the enteric nervous system. And so it's the part of the body that takes your food and breaks it down and then puts it where it needs to go in terms of like nutrients and how they're going to function in the body and all that. So it's breaking things down, organizing it, sending it off to where it needs to go. And that's kind of like the harvest, right? So if you think about that in terms of the fall and what you would be doing as a farmer or a gardener in the fall, you're harvesting the fruits, but you're also cutting things back. You're turning the compost, you're, working the land and preparing it. So you're taking everything that you've created from that season where everything is fruiting, everything is blooming, everything is out there, and you're using it, right? You're putting it to use. And that's also a big Virgo keyword. Virgo wants to be of service. Virgo wants to be of use. Virgo does not like to feel useless. So it's like, how can I be of service? How can I be utilized for something, or how can my talents and gifts be utilized for something, and not necessarily for recognition? Like Leo, they don't need recognition. In fact, Virgos don't want that. And I think that's kind of that hermit energy where they don't want to be in the limelight. They want to be behind the scenes and sort of supporting the people that are in the limelight almost.
Absolutely. That's so perfect as well, because it totally fits. So when you think about the hermit, especially this guy, if you look at him, he's got his staff, he's got his lantern, like he's got his head bowed, like he's deep in thought, or he's thinking about something or mulling something over. And I see that kind of very much as the Virgo energy, where it's like, right, I'm going to take this concept or this idea or this bigger, broader perspective, and I'm going to really start to home in on what the different aspects of this are and how it fits into the world. And when you think about this figure, I mean, certainly for me, he looks a bit like Merlin, right? He looks like the
Yeah.
wizard. He would be a massive advisor, somebody that you could go to trust. Like, they're going to help you see all different aspects of something. I got my little shiver up the back of my neck there. So, okay, so they're going to help you see all of the sides of something, and they're going to play a massive supporting role for you, but not necessarily be there when you're making the decision. Do you know what I mean? So there's a big support, and there's a big well of experience and knowledge. And it's funny when you say about being of use, because that's one of the things that I very much associate with Virgo. And one thing that I really don't think that they get enough credit for, marvelously kind. And they'll always be the people that notice the small things that you love the most,
Yeah.
or will do something on a really practical level. Like, they'll see you struggling and they'll be like, you know what, I picked up your shopping, or I did your washing, and I've done this, and this for you. And it's like always something that is really useful or practical that helps you in some way. One of my uncles is a Virgo, and he kind of bounces between the really obsessive thought where he just like picked something apart, i.e. a car. I've seen him literally pull a car to pieces and then rebuild it. It's actually scary. But then on the other hand of it, it's somebody that's really great to speak to gain a different perspective, and will help you kind of not compartmentalize, but certainly order your own thoughts and put them, in a sequence that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely what Virgo's good for. And there can be an energy of definitely overthinking things and picking things apart to death and missing the big picture. Would that also be part of the hermit energy? Because it's kind of more internalized and maybe they're not seeing what's going on around them.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's all about bringing that focus from outside there into myself. And when you think about the lantern that he's holding, that's one thing that I think they share with the Leo energy. And it's a very tenuous link, but like, Leo is very much about following my own true north, whereas the hermit is like, no, there is just truth and true north, and that's what we should be focusing on, and that's what the lantern's for. It's about finding the truth, or the objectivity rather than subjectivity. And so, yeah, when you think about the hermit, it's about coming from the outside, bringing it inward. And sometimes in order to do that, you have to kind of separate yourself from everything and everyone else.
Okay. And what about like perfectionism? Because that's definitely a very Virgoan trait that can be overdone, and also criticism. I mean, that's
Both, right? When you think about, let's say, King Arthur and Merlin practically beat him over the head with the stick until he got the answer. Don't guess at it. Very much a Yoda energy. Do or do not do. There is no try. And that's very much the hermit. Like, there's no in between. It's pretty much, it is what it is, or it isn't what it is. Do you know what I mean? It's like a very absolute kind of energy in that respect.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's kind of like, I mean, the Virgoan energy is very rational, logical, linear, and it very much is like objective versus subjective.
Mm.
It can change based on, additional facts and additional information. It's a mutable sign, but it's not going to change based on like gut instincts and intuition necessarily. It's more about analyzing those aspects of what's going on and deciding whether or not that's rational. So like a moon and Virgo person isn't going to trust your intuition if it doesn't logically make any sense. And so
Mhm.
that can be a very difficult placement for the moon, in addition to the fact that it's a very self-critical placement, because like they need proof for their intuition. They need proof, like tangible facts to back things up, or else they're just going to ignore their instincts. Yeah. So I guess that probably fits in, it sounds like, with that hermit energy.
Absolutely. The self-critical thing as well. I think one of the things with the Hermit card, this can very often show up for people when they're mulling things over, or when they're taking a journey that's going to take them outside of things. Or, I mean, I've seen this for anything from a pilgrimage, people visiting sacred sites so that they can get some deeper perspective or deeper wisdom on something. Um, I've seen this for people that are into science as well, believe it or not, because it's lots of looking at the facts. And one thing that I noticed with Virgo energy, I mean, I might be wrong here, but pattern recognition is something they tend to be really good at, or spotting the trends, where other people don't see them. So somebody like that has a very heavy hermit energy would probably say, well, I'm not psychic, I can just see the connections that other people can't. When that's kind of like a very practical way of saying, yeah, I can see things that other people can't.
Yeah, they tend to pick up on things. It's not necessarily like an intuitive thing. It's just that they notice small little nuances that other people would completely gloss over. And so, yeah, and it's an ability to read between the lines because of that ability to see those subtle things and to pick them out, especially when it is like a pattern, and it's showing up more than once and it seems important. So, yeah, definitely very much a Virgo energy there.
I wanted to ask as well. So, um, in because of where it falls, is Virgo's on the opposite half of the year? Is that right, or is it the point at which the year changes? Because it's the sixth house, right?
It's the sixth house. So Virgo season is right before the fall equinox. And so the autumn equinox starts with Libra, and that's when everything comes back into balance, right? You think about Libra, and it's like the balance between the masculine and the feminine, night and day and night become equal, that type of thing. And so Virgo is winding down and preparing for that phase, but it's not that phase just yet. So it's kind of end of summer, beginning of fall. It's a transitional period. Anytime you have a mutable sign, it's a transition between one season and another. One season's ending, and you're sort of preparing and shifting to make space for the energy that's coming in for that next season. So that is like a Virgo energy. And that's kind of that energy of like preparedness, right? Virgo's always about preparing and figuring things out and planning and organizing. It's like, I have to plan for the winter, right? I have to plan for the fact that fall is here. We have to have this harvest. We have to figure out our food supply for the entire winter. That's part of the reason why Virgo is such a Virgo energy. It's a survival energy too. It's like practical application of this in order to survive and thrive and to do things in the best possible way.
Yeah, I love that, and it's actually perfect. The other thing with this as well, because it's the number nine, is very often about wrapping things up as
Yeah.
well. This is where like it's, and it's funny because in that way, I guess you can kind of see a bit of an overlap with like some of the Saturnine motifs, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like the energy of wrapping things up. I mean, even the grey of his cloak, it's very sort of old kind of energy. But for me, I very often see this card as it's almost like where something becomes um, where something so you're used to something so much that you can do it really well. You know, like there's also an efficiency to this card, and it's very often because they've mapped the inner world, the inner senses, the inner mind, you know, like they know themselves inside out, and so therefore anything that comes up that isn't them really sticks out to them.
Yeah, and there can also be that controlling aspect of Virgo too, where they're trying to micromanage and control everything because they have a specific plan and they want it to be a certain way, and this is what logically makes sense and all of that. And I think that that could probably be a component to it as
Mm.
well. And I like the imagery of the Hermit card because he's like hunched over and he's like, he looks like he's just like burdened by his thoughts, like he's, you know, weathered and worn and he's been through a lot and he's just like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
such a Virgo thing.
Love that. So the other thing I was going to say, like in terms of mind as well, one of my friends, she's got two daughters, and one of them, the youngest one, is a Virgo, and I tell you, she cannot be told. She knows what she wants. She's very, very sure about everything, and rather than it just be from a place of like being a kid and being stubborn, when she'll reason with you, super intelligent, like you're having like a full conversation with like an adult child.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, and I mean, it's funny to watch, but from what I've observed from young and old Virgos, there's a real sense of intelligence there, but very much like a hermit, it's kind of like it's downplayed. It's
Mhm.
not like a look at me, I'm super smart. It's just I know what I know, and
Yeah.
that seems to come from like a place of just constantly drawing in knowledge or really paying attention to the cycles, to the seasons, to the patterns of things. And the way that you guys disseminate knowledge is amazing because it tends to be in ways that you can actually use, which
Yeah.
is really important. You know, it's this, yeah, for sure.
That's the biggest thing with Virgo. It's not like knowledge just for knowledge's sake. It's like I'm looking for something that I can use in practical application. And yeah, and even the what you were saying about like her knowing what she wants and like arguing her point and all of that, like Virgos are always right, even when they're wrong, because they know they've examined it up and down, left and right. Virgos, I'm always right. So
Love it. Oh, great. And then I wanted to ask as well, with the was what I was saying earlier about the kindness, um, they don't tend to own that. It's kind of like they'll just do things for you, and it's like, don't make a big deal of it.
yeah, they don't like a fuss being made over any, they're not doing anything for like Virgos hide away from the limelight. Like they do not want that recognition. It's like probably the most humble of all of the zodiac signs, where it's almost like you have to learn to accept praise and recognition for things. Otherwise it's just super awkward and people think you're just like strange. Like it can go over the top with
Yeah.
some Virgos for sure.
Is that like a, because I know with the sixth house, it's very often the house of drudgery as well, right? Hard work.
Servitude, yeah. And it's like Virgos, it's almost like they feel like that's their place. Like their place is like below everything else behind the scenes. They're not, you know, trying to rise above that or do anything really flashy. And that is kind of like, you know, also a sixth house energy. The signs don't always equal the houses, but there's definitely a connection there where it's more about the day to day and it's more about service. It's more about servitude. It's not necessarily that you're doing it for any big goal or any sort of end game.
Yeah, same. I love that because it's very in line with the motif of a hermit as well. They would be those fringe dwellers that made herbal cures for the village and stuff, but didn't want to live in the village, right? So
Yeah.
there's an element of being of service, but not necessarily being there to be a servant, which I absolutely love. I'm all for that. You know, I say that with astrologers and tarot readers and light workers and stuff. We're all here to be of service, but not to be, you know, downtrodden or seen as sometimes people see us in these roles.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Virgos can take it a little too far, and they can sometimes be more in that subservient role where they kind of pigeonhole themselves there, I would say, and that can be an issue. And especially because Virgos are prone to self-criticism, they don't just criticize everyone around them. Although that can be the case, they're their own worst critics. Like anytime you have, especially like Virgo moons, but any Virgo energy is going to be more self-critical, very self-aware to the point of like excess. And so they don't feel like they're worthy of the praise and the, attention and all that, because they notice all of their flaws and imperfections. They're like, well, I didn't do this, this, and this right, so you shouldn't praise me for that, even though it turned out really well, right? So yeah, that definitely can be part of that Virgo energy too. It can be taken too far.
Yeah. So would you say like something like maybe meditation is not good for a Virgo? Maybe they need something a bit more physical, maybe like yoga or Tai Chi or something.
I
Would
mean,
that be?
Virgos love physical activity because it has to do with like their health, right? A lot of Virgos do yoga. A lot of Virgos, also, out of all of the signs, Virgos and Pisces have the strongest connections to animals, and Virgos and Pisces tend to be vegans and vegetarians more often than not, even sometimes to the detriment of their health. And so they'll look at it as being like a health thing. But Virgos versus Pisces will actually switch their diet if they've been proven wrong or if their health warrants it, versus Pisces, which will stick to those ideals regardless of what it's doing to their body. It's more like martyrdom.
Yeah.
Not to say that every vegan diet is going to hurt your body. I'm just saying like that's kind of a thing that I've noticed with Virgos and with Pisces. And so Virgos do have a connection to animals, especially like agricultural animals, so like farm animals and things like that. Would you say that the hermit has an association with animals?
Yes, and the reason I say that is because even though he's a solitary character, the energy of the hermit is one that is so in tune with the environment that they're in, that they're able to pass by wild creatures and not disturb their environment. It's
Mm.
kind of like, I'm a guest here, so I'm one of you that's in this space with you, and so they would have that ability to, be around wild animals, and the wild animal just maybe give like a tentative look, but be like, nah, they're all right, cool. Continue about their business. No, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, is there anything else about the hermit card that we should know about?
No, I think that's pretty much all of it. I think there's loads there as well for people to unpick. I think when it comes to readings as well, obviously you have to pay attention to what else comes up with it. But really take a moment, like if you think about the way that he's standing, he's in that deep sense of thought. If you're going to read the Hermit card, pay attention to what he's trying to tell you, because although it's going to be very practical and although it is asking you to make yourself quiet, he's kind of literally saying to you, do this, take a moment to really observe what I'm doing, what I'm looking at, the cards that are around me, and you will get the message that is specifically for you, or maybe the person that you're reading for.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's really good information. Very helpful for tarot readings and all of that. So
Cool.
cool.
And finally, one last thing. Sorry, it's amazing that you mentioned Pisces, because this card number 9 is opposite the Moon card in tarot, which is
Oh,
18, and that is the card that rules Pisces as a sign.
interesting. Yeah. And I mean, they're opposite signs. So that makes sense that they would kind of go hand in hand in that way. So very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this again. This has been awesome. And again, if you guys haven't subscribed to Raphael's channel, definitely do so. Also, we did a really in-depth, like what was it, 3.5 hour webinar all about the astrology from now until 2026. And so that's a donation-based webinar. So you pay whatever you like and you'll get all of that really juicy information. And I'll put that link down in the description below. Thank you again, Raphael, so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care, guys.